Welcome to our Christmas craft along. We've got a live event today. We're going to be making a Christmas ornament. And as quilters, crafters, sewists, however you want to label yourself, we're going to create something really fun, very small, but one of those unique things that you put a little of yourself into. So if you haven't already, download the pattern. If you haven't already downloaded it, you might just want to grab something to take some notes on, because I'm going to give you a size option towards the end of the show. So for those of you watching, you're getting the size option for a mug map along with the smaller version for an ornament. So the QR code is on the screen. All you have to do is take your phone across that. Your camera will pick that up and take you right to the pattern, and you can download that at your leisure. So we are going to be having some fun with really small pieces today. My name is Colleen Tauke, and I love to challenge quilters to do something maybe a little bit outside their comfort zone. We, a lot of times, will work on bigger blocks. We're working on 10-inch, 12-inch. We might go down to a 6-inch block, but we're going to go down to a 3-inch block today. So I'm going to give you some good tips on working with some small pieces to get the accuracy that you really want. And, always remember that close counts. Not everything has to be perfect in life. More about getting it done and gifting it that's more important. So remember to pop into the, underneath the video here and tell us where you're watching from. We love to see our regulars pop in and say hello from all over the world, literally. But we also like to know if you're a new viewer. Let us know where you're watching from. It's fun to kind of, in my head, see the map pop up as we get from country to country across the United States and outside of the United States. Christmas is celebrated in many, many countries, and it's celebrated every year. So if you don't happen to get it done this year, there's always next year. And you could change the color options and do other things with this too. It wouldn't just have to be Christmas. Stars are wonderful no matter what time, at what season. This would be Sandra saying good morning from a beautiful day in Florida. Well, we have a really rainy day in Iowa, which I'm glad for, and it's not snowflakes yet. So we are glad that you're watching. Kelly says hello from Arizona, and Debbie is watching from Colleyville, Texas. I recognize that name too. We are glad that you're with us. If at any time I go over something too quickly, or I use a product that you're not familiar with, pop in and say, hey, what was that? Because I really want to make sure that you have full advantage of all the things that I've either tried out, techniques that I may have perfected along the way, so that you have all of those tips and tricks also. We have Margie saying hello from Beverly, Mass, and Sue watching from Four Oaks, North Carolina. I might have to look on the map to see where that one's at. I've watched live maybe once before, so we are glad that you're back. That's wonderful. Okay, this is this little project I'm calling Starlight. It is a fairly simple block. Now, you may have even made this block in large size before, because it's a simple 9-patch. Now, if you're new to quilting, what does 9-patch mean? 9-patch means that it's 3 units across and 3 units down. So there's 9 kind of square units within this. And we're going to make these fun hourglass units, these little triangle pieces here that make the star points for us. And we've got Brenda saying hello from Texas, Nancy popping in from Pennsylvania. I have to remember my abbreviations here. And Terry saying hello from Bernard, Texas. Let's see. I get everybody. You guys are just coming in from everywhere. Lisa from Wisconsin is here. We are so glad that you guys are popping in. It's fun to do small projects, because as you work on these and put the binding or the trim on at the end, you can do that in front of the TV in the evenings. So getting the sewing done ahead, you can have some handwork at a later point in the day. So we are going to work on Starlight. Now, when it comes to doing this pattern, there are just, I'm using 3 fabrics. And one thing I really want to address when we're doing something this small is the scale of the fabrics, okay? The scale means that the print on the fabric is small, more in the micro print, so that you don't get, like if it was a bird print, you don't just get one eye of the bird and, and maybe a foot in another place, because we're talking about pieces that are about as big as my thumbnail for the points on the star here. So instead of picking fabrics that may have, you look at these and you think, oh, these would be fun, but these snowflakes are really large scale. You might want to use something like a polka dot, a micro dot. Those are really popular out there. Other fabrics, this is a really great Christmas print, but you start cutting out of that and you're going to get a lot of colors popping up, and you won't get the design that you want, the continuity in the project. So going to those smaller scale prints is really important. Let's see, we got Nancy saying hello from Southeast Kentucky. Yeah, it is really fun. And I will show you some more color placement options too, because after I got done, it's kind of like potato chips. You just can't, enjoy one. You have to make more. So I made like 4 more of these that are in progress. So when I was looking for something, I wanted that smaller scale. So the white is actually a silver dot on white. It's really small scale, but the dots are close together so that they'll actually pop up in our star points. And I had picked kind of a linen-y print red. It looks like a solid, but it's got a little texture to it. So it's a linen-y type look to that. And then the very center on this one, and I did use it in other placements within the project when I made other versions, but I found this really small, it's like a ring of dots. They're not quite Cheerios, but the small kind of micro print dot is small enough to still show up as a print in the very center of the block, as you see there. So it has some texture instead of being all solids. Now, that being said, you can use all solids through this, but since I wanted to use 2 reds in this project, I had to find something that had some interest in it that wasn't that small scale. So when we go to start thinking about cutting our pieces, this is where everybody might just get a little bit nervous, because we're going to cut some small pieces. Now, before you cut your fabric, if you aren't sure of working with small pieces, one thing you can do is use best press or some kind of spray starch or spray sizing on your fabric. Now, I did not list it in there. I thought of it later after the pattern was printed. So that's why I want you to be able to take some notes. This will help give your fabric some extra body so things won't stretch out of shape when you're working on these smaller pieces. So this is kind of my tip for working with small things that you're afraid, because we're going to have some bias edges we're going to work with, and this will keep those bias edges from getting distorted. So best press, spray starch, spray sizing on the fabric before you cut out your pieces, okay? So prepare your pieces of fabric with some starch ahead of time if you're nervous about it. If you're fine with working with small pieces, you can jump right in. We are going to be cutting 1.5-inch squares, so don't hyperventilate. These are like postage stamps almost. 1.5-inch squares as the outside corners in our 9 patch. There's a 1.5-inch square for the very center of our star. See, you have 5 pieces already done. We only have to make 4 pieced units to make this block. So we're going to cut 2 3/8 inch. Okay, I know that's a funny number. These are going to be oversized, so you can cut them down to being the perfect size for putting your block together. Okay, so these aren't quite as scary yet, but we're going to do a process with these to get our hourglass units. Now, there are methods for making hourglass blocks 2-color, but we're not going to be making that many of them. So I wanted to teach a very traditional way of putting those together. So we're going to do some quick cutting here. Let's see. We have Sharon who says, I want to make it for a coaster. Hold on. At the very end, I'm going to give the coaster mug mat sizes. Okay. So hang in there with me. Catherine says, hello from the UK. This is our first live event. Yay! Welcome to our live event. Now, Sharon, if you don't want to make this bigger, you can put a border around it, and that can be your coaster. But if you want the block bigger, wait till the very end. I'm going to give you some sizes to cutting it for a mug mat, okay? Okay, in making this, we're taking our 2 3/8 inch squares, and we are going to cut them diagonally in both directions. Yes, I know there are speed methods that do this faster. Maybe some consider faster in 2-color hourglass, but there may be times you want to make it 3-color because of the placement on the other versions I made. So that's why I'm cutting them up completely like this, so that no matter where you decide to put your color placement, maybe you want to play with it later, that you know still the construction for getting these put together properly. And sometimes knowing and understanding the basics of how something goes together from its kind of the most simple version is good for us. So we need, if you look at these little hourglass, that's what this is. You need 2 of the light and 2 of the red. So from one set like this, you're going to yield 2 of the units we need. So that's why you're going to be cutting 2 total. So you get to 4 units to make all of those needed. So I tend to lay my pieces out beside me in the orientation that I need to put them together. And you will see that in your pattern, okay? There is a diagram that tells you how to place them. And then you're going to join them together with 1/4 inch seaming. So we're going to go over to the machine here. And as I bring these over, I like to line them up right in front of the machine, because if I put these together thinking, oh, I'm going to put the seam here, by the time I move from here to here, I'm somehow going to get them the wrong side seamed, and then it won't work. So making sure it's right in front of me, I line it up, and sometimes I'll lay it even on point so that the seaming down one direction, and we're going to go the other, so that I can then lay a red on top of a white triangle on top of a red, and then I know that I'm going to seam straight down this section. We're going to be doing the short legs, not the long legs of the triangle, so that that diagram in your pattern is really helpful if you haven't made these units before, if you're new to making hourglass things. So that set your machine at that 1/4 inch seam. I have my needle set so that the edge of my foot is a 1/4 inch. You may have a 1/4 inch foot for your machine. You do your best 1/4 inch seam here. Don't pull or push, because remember, those short legs of that triangle are all bias edges. So be very, very careful. When I usually teach this, I say, treat them like butterfly wings. Very careful, very respectful of those edges so they don't distort on you. And then if you have all of them cut, you can go ahead and join them one behind the other so that you can do this in kind of a faster motion or a method by doing chain piecing. I hate to break thread. It seems like there's always thread tails in the way. So if I can get my pieces lined up so that I can fit them onto the machine one after the other, it's kind of like a challenge to myself to see if I can just feed them into the machine and not break thread very often. Sometimes this is even what I'll do. I have them under here. I have my little spider so that I don't have a long thread tail beginning. Just a scrap of fabric. I will go up in here and I'll snip away the pair, that first pair that I stitched, and leave the other ones in the machine for right now. That way I don't have thread tails again. See, I've joined these together. Now I'm going to gently open this up and press the seam allowances toward the red, darker fabric, in this case, the red. That way seam allowances won't show through the white fabric. I'm just going to do a real quick press with my finger and make sure that my iron is set nice and warm. And then I'm going to press the other side. Now they're tacked together so that I know I'm going to join the right, correct edges later. So I've got that kind of finger pressed in place, but I'm going to come over to the iron. I'm going to use the tip of my iron because that will kind of make sure that I get that seam all the way open. And then onto the second piece, just give it a quick press. Now, much easier when everything lies flat like this. And if you've pressed toward the red fabric, that means you have opposing seams, so that now they're hinged together like this. When you put them right sides together, you have the opposing seam in the middle. It's very satisfying to get those locked up next to each other. If you need to kind of roll them between your fingers or use a pin, you can. But pretty much you're not going to go too far apart because you've jumped from one section to the other. They're kind of nested already. So Nancy says she loves the silver dot. Yeah, I bought a good chunk of that when I found it because I thought, oh, that would work for winter quilts, Christmas quilts, just that subtle little bit of glitter. Everybody loves a little glam. Okay, a YouTube comment we got was that a walking foot, since it's so small. That's an option if you feel comfortable using your walking foot, or if you have a dual feed on your machine so that you can just bring it down and hooks on. I don't seem to have too much of a problem at this point. My walking foot is very hard for me to align to find the 1/4 inch. So I don't use it for piecing as much, but I do know people who swear by them and they love to use their walking foot. So if that makes you feel more comfortable and more secure working with things, go ahead and do that. There are really no hard and fast rules about whether or not the walking foot is, that thing that everybody enjoys. Now, the other thing is that getting those little pieces under the machine sometimes can be hard because they're just so tiny. So using a stiletto, or you can use a large pin. You can use the tip of a seam ripper, anything that helps you kind of maneuver those little pieces under there and hold them so that when they go under the foot, they go under with the raw edges lined up properly all the way through, okay? Because when we get to the edge of a piece on a triangle, that little tip, it tends to want to swing out one way or the other, and then the seam allowance sometimes isn't very accurate. So using something to really hold on to that tip of the triangle as it goes through helps keep that seam allowance nice and straight. Now, when we get this opened up, we've got our tiny little hourglass here, and try to get those, the colors to kind of kiss in the center as best you can. Close counts. Donna says hello from Maine. We've got Martha popping in from Bryan, Texas. Noreen from rainy Kansas. It's raining here too, so we're in the same boat. We've got, I can't read the name, Valerie maybe. It's from Staffordshire, England. Isn't that fabulous? We've got our international quilters with us too. So now that I've got that second seam where I joined those, I'm going to go back and snip that little jump thread that I had in the first seaming between my joins of triangles so that I can go in here and pop open my seam. So on that last seam I just did, I want to press one direction and one the opposite direction. The idea is to reduce the bulk. We're working on something very small. We don't want a big lumpy spot in our block. So all of my seam allowances are going to swirl in one direction so that as I open that up, it's going to look like a tiny little 4 patch in the very center. Now I can take this over to the iron. Again, give it a nice little press to the tip of the iron to make sure my seam allowances are open all the way. And that will get me my hourglass like that on the front with that tiny little 4 patch in the very center. It's kind of fun to pop those seams open because it does reduce the bulk quite a bit in the very center. Now that we have at least one of those, we have to make 3 more to make all of the points on our star there. But what I really wanted to talk about is how to size this down, because it has to be the 1.5 that the corner blocks and the center block are cut. And this is oversized just a bit. Now, 1.5 inches is what we need to do. And I need my rotary cutter. We have to think about what the center of this block will be at 1.5. If you divide that in half, 3/4 of an inch is dead center. So that means on your ruler, I'm going to use that 45-degree line to help me line things up across the block. And then I'm going to find where the 3/4 and 3/4 line up. And if you want to take like a dry erase marker that you can later remove from the ruler, it does kind of help give you an idea. Okay, that's the 3/4 inch. That's the dot where my center of my block is going to be. Dry erase is great because you can wipe it away later. We can lay that on top of our block. And I'm going to, again, think about the diagonal. So you know you have it squared up there. We're looking for the seam going the other direction also. We want that to come out at the 1.5 inch spot and the 1.5 inch down here. And then we're going to trim 2 sides at a time. Sometimes people say, well, I'll just trim 2 sides and then it'll be 1.5 inches. But that means the center gets off center. So if you want your center to be lined up properly, you have to think about 1.5 is what you're cutting it to. Half of that is 3/4 of an inch. And align that 3/4 inch intersection with the intersection of your block. Again, look for the diagonals on your ruler because almost all of them have the 45-degree line marked. Get the center of the 3/4 inch lines, crisscross, crosshairs right in the center of your block. Your seam going the opposite direction, be at 1.5, and then you can trim the last 2 sides. There we go. We're just wasting a little tiny bit so that you get this cute little hourglass piece that is going to fit in here as your star point. Now, it looks like they shrink extremely because we have to take seam allowances out of all 4 sides yet. So that's going to be the fun part of making things that are smaller in scale. But it's a good way to try without saying, I'm going to do this whole wall quilt of tiny, tiny pieces, starting on something smaller that's accomplishable. Let's see. We have, oh, somebody commented my shirt. Yes, this is I'm getting into the Christmas spirit early here and hauling out my Christmas kind of things just to be a little more festive for our Christmas craft along. Love the tip on using the dry erase marker. Yes. We use Post-it notes, we use glow line tape, we use painter's tape, but the nice part about the dry erase marker is that, yes, it just comes off, voila, gone, and then you're on to your next project. So you can always make the marking where you want it, and then it's very easy to remove. So dry erase is really great. Okay, once you actually get the pieces, let's see, real quick. In your pattern, you're going to find basic layout for how to put together a 9 patch. So that is kind of an easy process. So when you're working on this, you're going to want to press your seam allowances in the top row toward the outside edge because there's no pieced units in the outer corners. Then here in the center row, you'll press your seam allowances toward the center. Bottom row, seam allowances toward the outer edge. And then you'll have those perfectly opposed seams when you go to join the 3 pieces together to make your starlight block. Now, I wanted to make sure that I had time to tell everybody, okay, you can upsize it. I don't have this quilted and backed yet, but this is the coaster size. So if you wanted to make a mug mat or a coaster, grab your pencil. Here are the dimensions you will need to cut. So for the corner units and the very center, these are cut 2 inches. So corner units, center block, cut 2 inches. For the star points out here, the pieces that you're going to use to make your hourglass, cut those 3 inches. Okay. Now, you're going to make these 3 inches, but your trim down, I wish I could have everybody answer at the same time. When you trim these down, you're going to trim them to 2 inches. It has to match the outer corner in the center, correct? So it's easy to remember by what it needs to go to next to. So knowing that that's the size you're going to trim that down to. The only other number you need to worry about is for your binding. In the small version, you are going to cut about a 15-inch piece just so you have enough to work with to get it all done. And in the mug mat coaster size, you're going to need about 25 inches of binding to get around this guy. I made him first as an ornament, and then I thought, well, that I'd have to have a giant tree, and I have a really small house. So I didn't think this was going to be the greatest. So I went down a little smaller to challenge you just a little bit more, but I still love this one too. So mug mat is your bonus by cutting 2-inch and 3-inch squares for your mug mat. You can make 2 sizes for this. So Starlight, here is the options. Remember I told you I got started and then just couldn't stop making blocks. So in this one I used red as my background, but then I flipped and did the white as the background, and look how different they appear. I love color placement, kind of illusions, I guess, because the fun part is all the variations. Now, these have the very same center block, that little red ditty print in the middle, but I wanted to use the ditty print. It works as the start points also. So I flipped it around there. And then remember why I had you cut the little triangles? Because sometimes you want to make it 3 colors instead of 2. Well, of course I had to do 3 color. So these are 3 color hourglass units. We've got white as the background here. Red is the star point, but that little print is kind of in the background. You can see the little bit of texture kind of glow behind that there. And then I switched out the very center block too and did this. So you get a real more of a dense looking star. This one holds together as all one color red almost. And then those versions here that have the 2 color hourglass. So in the directions, when it comes to color placement, because when it comes to cutting, you're going to have to play around. If you're going to do 3 color, think about that. You're going to have to cut up a square and just take one of them out to do like a background in center. Maybe onto a totally different variety and play with it. So remember, if you make some, post them. We would love to see your variation of Starlight, the ornament, quilted ornament for this year's quilt along. Let's see. What if we have any other questions? Linda says, I love the tip to use a dry erase marker. Oh, that's right. Got that already. Shorten up stitch length, working with small pieces. That's true. I guess I didn't include that. On most of my machines, I will have my stitch length somewhere around a 2.0. When you're working with smaller pieces, you can go down to like a 1.8 is probably sufficient. So that when you're working on these outer edges here, you don't have popped seams when you're pressing, because there's not that many stitches holding the entire thing together. So taking your stitch length down to about a 1.8 will really help keep those seams be a bit more stable. I think using the dry erase marker and the ruler is a great idea. So more than one person has chimed in with that one. Wonderful. Let's see. Hello from sunny California, and I think it's Gail. Jenny, I believe. Sorry. Joan says, very clever. Love the project. We are glad that you guys are with us. Monica's popping in from Canada. Anita from Ottawa. We are glad that you guys are popping in for our fun little craft along. Now, also listed with the craft along, there are bundles. There are tons of really fun, creative ideas for you to have fun along and download patterns. One from that we've done in the past is this paper piece little coaster. These could be ornaments also, these little trees that we've done in the past. And then we have the larger version for a mug mat. So don't forget, there's a lot of really great patterns that you can pop in and download. And just to finish up, I'm headed to the long arm next because I have a new granddaughter coming in January. And then we found out we have another one coming in April. So this grandma is really busy. We are doing a really fun pastel print baby quilt this afternoon on the long arm. And then I've got another one to design. So those designs will be coming along shortly. We are so glad that you joined us for the Christmas craft along. Until next time, give those you love a hug.